I was sat in a small beer bar on Sukhumvit Soi 22 in 2010. This was my second trip to Thailand, and the music playing in the bar was way too loud. There were neon lights everywhere, and the girls were speaking to me like they'd known me for years. The beer was very cold, but I was sat there like an idiot because I felt like I'd been woken up. It wasn't like I had some big idea. It was just a feeling that I was in the right place, the feeling that I was somewhere that I belonged, and I was in my element. I sat on one of those high stools. My back was aching after sitting on it for only 10 minutes, but I didn't care. There were people playing pool, other men my age, some even older than me, joking with the girls who appeared to be less than half their age, but nobody cared about it because that was just how Thailand was meant to be. I kept getting more beers, and I was always offered more as soon as one finished. "One more, Mai?" was the question the girls kept asking me, and of course I wanted another beer. I was 58 then, already a bit out of shape. My knees had failed me a few years before, so I struggled to walk very far. I couldn't hear as well as I used to, and perhaps that was years of going to concerts catching up on me, but inside that bar, I felt like I was on top of the world. I just remember feeling that this is what my life had been missing all this time, and although I'd been to Thailand before, I appreciated this so much more this time. I knew what went on at bars like that, but I didn't care. It was the sort of place I would go into and say I would have one drink. Then I would find myself having more and more until the street outside quieted down as the night wore on, and they closed the shutters at the front because they were meant to close the bar at a certain time. It was just a normal holiday, but the type of holiday that I remember with happiness. My first time to Thailand was a couple of years before that. I went out for only a week on a cheap deal I found, and I remember landing at night, stumbling my way through the airport and getting in a taxi to go straight down to Sukhumvit, and I will readily admit to not knowing what I was doing at all. I kind of felt lost when I started walking around. There was just so much going on around me, lights everywhere, traffic everywhere, and every time you would walk past a bar, the girls were smiling at you because they knew and could sense that you were a newbie. Like many guys do on their first night, I found myself in Nana Plaza. It was one of those destinations you hear about through friends of friends back home, and I had to go and have a look for myself. I can remember walking up the stairs. When you walk in, you've got stairs to the left and right, and I can remember taking a right turn and walking up the steps there. I remember walking into that first bar and ordering a beer, but that beer, although it tasted like every other beer I've ever had, was better because of where we were. That was my first taste of Leo, which would become my favourite beer in the world, and it was just an amazing first experience. It made me understand why so many guys from where I was from went there, England, because we just didn't have things as good as this at home. The line that everyone said each to each other was always the same, spoken with a slight grin if not a hint of sarcasm. Everyone said they were there for the temples and the culture, but no one was. I didn't have a plan that night. I didn't even really know how the bars worked then, so I found myself just watching what was going on and trying to piece together what I saw. Guys buying lady drinks, girls laughing, and it was an experience of a lifetime, but I wasn't yet hooked like I was on that second trip. I can remember walking back to my hotel with a stupid smile on my face, like I unlocked Life 2.0, and what a time it was. I worked in a call centre in the UK. Even at my age at the time, I still did it, and at this point, we're already in 2012, and I was there with a headset digging into the side of my head like it did every day, listening to people shouting about their bills and things they needed to pay for, expecting me to fix it, even though I couldn't. It was a normal 9 to 5. I did different shifts every now and then, but it was so boring sitting under the same strip lights, managers timing the bathroom breaks, and the scripts up on screen telling me what to say based on what the person on the other end of the phone said. It was so rigid that I couldn't even breathe. I would always stare at the clock on the wall, and at this point, in 2012, all I was thinking about was Thailand. I wasn't thinking about the sights, the temples, as they say. I was thinking about the nights and the bars and the fact that I wanted to be there. The memory of bar girls is what kept me going, and I missed the way I was made to feel when I was in the bars. It wasn't like I could just leave work in the evening and go down to a bar in my local area. They just didn't exist. And that I found quite disappointing if you think about it logically. Although I was in my 50s, I was starting to feel older than I was. It took me half an hour just to walk from my car to the office desk because of my legs, and I had to have the volume on the headset turned up to the maximum because of the problems with my ears. And then I was starting to get bored of life in general. I watched people at work leave, friends drop out altogether, some get sick, some lost their jobs, and I thought I needed to have a plan, even if it was just a fantasy. It was so far away from my reality, but it was still a plan, and that was good enough. My plan was a one-way ticket to Bangkok, no return leg. I tried to be careful with money, but every month something came up and put a dent in my step. A car repair, an extra bill, and the dream was just slipping further and further away, just out of reach, but still firmly in mind. I always thought about the idea of moving to Thailand for good, not just going on a long holiday, but the proper move, set up completely, cut ties with everything around me and go. I was so sick and tired of the phones, sick of the cold mornings and having to scrape ice off the windscreen in winter, sick more than anything of the hideous thing that was council tax, one of my most hated taxes, because you can't get away from it even if you're not working. It wasn't like I enjoyed living where I was either. All I kept thinking about was getting some money together so I could pack a bag and leave and never look back. But the problem was I couldn't do that because I didn't have anything. I told a mate at work about the dreams I had, and he just laughed at me, said everyone says the same thing, and then they get to 65 and buy a caravan and go to Dorset instead. I looked at him like that sounded scary, and I said, not me. I will never be that guy. I will not spend my days arguing with neighbours about parking. I remember looking into the cost of rooms in Bangkok, how much for a long stay apartment, what kind of visa I would need to be able to get, and everything seemed within reach if only I had some money. I kept thinking about the possibility of finding a nice girl who would respect me for me and who would love me regardless of the fact that I wasn't good on my legs and I was a bit hard of hearing. It was always one more year though, because I couldn't get close. I knew deep down that there was nowhere I could make any extra money from unless something drastic happened. Then a relative of mine fell ill, and I spent a lot of time driving up and down the motorway at the weekend to go and visit. Those drives alone made it worse in a way, because you think about how fragile life is and the fact that you're wasting your own. And then you're stuck behind lorries thinking I shouldn't be here. I was always trying to convince myself I needed to do something, but the problem was, I just knew it was so far away, always thinking about the dream. Then it happened. The thing that changed everything. My family member, who was ill, passed away, and that was just meant to be a quiet meeting with a solicitor. It actually turned into the life-changing event that I'd been dreaming about. I'd inherited £267,000, which I was never expecting. I knew they had some money, but I didn't know I would get any, and that was a surprise, and I kind of felt like they were reaching out from the grave and telling me to make the most of it while I still could. To start with, it didn't make me happy. It doesn't work like that after you've lost someone you love. But the path in front of me was clear for the first time. Thailand, if I played it careful, was within reach. I could do everything I'd dreamed of since that first trip, and it was my chance to get out of the misery of my own life. I knew people would talk, they always do. They say they wouldn't, but they do. They'd say I was running away from my problems, or I was chasing the girls. But I told myself they could say anything they wanted, because I put in my time in England, and I was tired of it. I knew how easy it was to get drawn into Thailand, and I tried to promise myself I would not be one of those guys who blew it all on nights out and bad choices. I even said you could be that guy if you're not careful. I didn't actually tell many people. I just kept it quiet, started putting everything together until I was comfortable enough to tell my manager that I was done. Just like that, I quit, and I put in my notice, just to be the good guy, and I remember calling my closest mate and telling him that I'm going to be leaving for good, and maybe you should think about doing something as well. He said fair play to me, be careful, and I just laughed at him, saying do not worry, I'm not an idiot, and I meant exactly what I said. I wasn't going to be doing anything stupid. I was going to be living the best life ever, and I couldn't wait. When I made the decision, the first thing I needed to do was decide what visa I needed. Because I was over 50, I could get the retirement one. Very painless process, and I had more than enough money to be able to extend that, and that made me excited. I just packed things I could carry with me. I didn't feel the need to take more than that, and everything I couldn't take, I just got rid of. I either sold it or gave it away because I was never going back. I wasn't trying to be brave about it, but I felt like I was doing something that people should look at and consider brave, but deep down I was a bit scared. I was shaking a bit to think about the what-ifs, but I did feel like I'd finally done something for myself, and I wasn't going to apologise for it. The flight itself was long, really bad on my knees, and it was one of those flights where there was a crying baby very close by and I wasn't able to sleep. But I got through it thinking about everything that awaited me. When the plane landed in Bangkok and the doors opened and you walk out, you know immediately where you are. You could walk out with your eyes closed and know where you were. It was that smell you get when you're in Thailand, the better smell than the one you left behind. It felt really great getting stamped into the country with my proper visa. They gave me a 3-month entry, and I needed to work on getting that extended at some point. And I just found a taxi, and that was exhilarating because it was different to the times before when I was on holiday. I completely stopped thinking about England, my old job, the place I used to live, and now all I needed was a room with a shower and then a beer. I had talked about it with myself for all these years, but now I was finally there, and it was up to me to make sure I didn't wreck it for myself in the first month like so many did. I had my rules: spend less than I needed to, drink less than I wanted to, and don't tell anyone how much you have. I was staying just off Soi 8. I booked for a week while I was going to look for somewhere more permanent, and by the time I got there, I was so full of energy that I couldn't think of doing anything other than going out. I dropped off my bag in the room, had a quick shower, looked out of the window of the hotel to the streets below, and just said to myself, "You're here. You've made it. It's now, finally, your turn." At first, I kept it very lean. I was trying to spend as little as I could. I found myself a cheap room up near On Nut after I'd been there for that first week. I opened a bank account in Thailand so I could transfer money in for my visa extension, and that felt great. And I was watching what I was spending, although I'd given myself a budget for those first nights out. I wasn't careful when it came to nights out, but with everything else I was. I tried to have a game with myself, shaving off a few baht every now and then, going for something that was 5 baht cheaper, and it made a small difference, but it wasn't fun. I spent a lot of time walking around Lower Sukhumvit in the evenings. I would go out telling myself I would look, but sometimes I went in as well, and most of those first nights I did. When I went into the bars, I would say 3 beers and no more, and sometimes I stuck to it, but other times I wouldn't. The months were going by and life was great. I wasn't overspending and I was still enjoying myself. And I'd occasionally get the bus down to Pattaya because I wanted a change of pace. I wanted to see different things and how things compared to Bangkok. I kept telling myself not to be stupid, but the temptation was always there. All the time, all I thought about was having a good time. And moderation was difficult when everything was so close by and so good. I knew that danger was only a short walk away, a SkyTrain ride and a short walk, but even still it was only close by. The temptation of the bars and the girls was strong, and I learned to live with that temptation, albeit I would be drawn to the bars uncontrollably from time to time. I did tell myself I had it under control. Maybe I did at the start, but it never usually lasts until you really mean it. I really meant it, but I also really loved Bangkok, so much so that nothing else mattered. I always loved Sukhumvit Soi 22 when I was there originally, and when I moved there, the bar complex where that macro is now was one of my favourites, and it was there when I met a girl. It was that place right next to the rundown toilet at the back of the complex, black glass doors, and it was also a long building with one pool table at the back, and I used to like going to that complex all the time and going from bar to bar. That was my first time in her bar, and I don't know what it was about her, but damn, she was special. She was a lot younger than me, there's no point even saying that. Her English wasn't great, but we could understand each other, and she just seemed like a flawless diamond among more rough, yet still beautiful diamonds. It was fun talking to her, just the innocent conversations you have over a game of Connect 4, and the pool games you play while accidentally bumping into each other and talking things a little bit too far. I was attracted to her, not just her looks, but her personality was something that I felt differed from other girls I'd interacted with throughout my whole time going to Thailand. I took her out at the bar for something to eat. They had a really great Indian restaurant if you walked back down to the big Sukhumvit Road, crossed it, and entered an opposite Soi, a huge Indian place on land that must have been worth a fortune. But the curries were great and affordable. I probably shouldn't have taken her there in hindsight because she didn't appear to like Indian food, but she didn't seem to care as long as I was happy. She was probably thinking it would be better for her in the long run. Then you run the gauntlet to feeling like you have to go back every single night to see her. There's no question of not going, and that became everything I was living for. I was waking up in the morning and eating, going about my daily business with the sole focus of going to her bar in the evening. It was the beginning of my love affair with her, one that I thought would last forever. She was just everything I would have wanted in a girl. The thing was, I thought I was everything she wanted in a guy. I thought she overlooked the fact that I was bad on my legs and a bit hard of hearing because it didn't matter to her, because we were soulmates. Things started off small between us. Before she'd even moved in with me, I was giving her a little bit of extra money for her taxi back to her place. I started paying for her phone, and when we went out during the day, I'd buy her new shoes. I even bought her a new phone, and I told myself that I was just being kind and trying to solidify the relationship. It wasn't meant to be a pattern, and I wasn't throwing money away. I wasn't showing off either. I was just a man who had a little bit more than her, feeling like I was sharing, because she was sharing her love with me. It felt good to be the one who could help her. I could solve her problems, and it felt great. She never asked for big things, and I respected that about her. And I kept thinking that I'm definitely not like those mugs who lose everything to these girls, because I'm careful and we're actually in love. That's the difference. I found it hard to reconcile what I was doing with somebody who looked like me doing the same thing. I was in a different position because we loved each other, yet the other guy I saw with the girl so much younger than him, she didn't love him. He didn't know what he was doing, but I did. And when you get to that level of self-assuredness, it can only end badly. I never went to other bars anymore. I only went to hers. And I felt like I had to go there because I wasn't there. Maybe she would be talking to someone else, and I didn't like the sound of that. On the nights I didn't see her, I would be dreaming about her, but then I'd be worrying about her at the bar with other guys, and that didn't sit right with me because we were in love. One day I asked her to stay over with me, and then the rest of the day, like I did quite often, and I took her out to buy a really nice handbag to show her I could, and all I wanted to do was stay with her, but I didn't quite know how to tell her that I wanted her to move in. I told her I loved her lots of times, and she told me she loved me as well. And you don't tell someone you love them unless you really do. That's what I thought. But one thing I didn't do was tell my mates, because I knew how they'd react. But this was different. We were different together, and anybody else just would not understand. By this point, I'd made a few friends with other expats, and the first time I mentioned her to one of them, he just told me to be careful. He warned me. But that's what they all do. They had been there a lot longer than I had. They'd been there and done that. They'd known guys who lost a lot, but they always believed their own advice. It's always different, he said. And then he went on to laugh about how the only thing different is how much guys lose and how stupid the things they were that they did. I can remember being brash with him, telling him she really was different, because in my mind she was, and I even told him to keep his business, wishing I never said anything. But I was getting closer and closer to her. All I wanted to do was have her move in with me, but I knew that would take commitment from my part in terms of being able to support her. She wouldn't be able to work anymore, and therefore I would need to support her. I tried to convince myself I would be fine with that. I never thought about walking away, that would have been too painful, but I put aside all the advice I got because I was just so happy in the moment. After I'd been going back to her bar for approximately 2 months, I would say, at this point every single day, maybe 5 or 6 days off, I knew it was now or never. I asked her to be brutally honest with me about things she did when I wasn't there, and every time she said something that I didn't want to hear, it made me feel heartbroken, like I really needed to move faster than I was. That was when I asked her to leave the bar and move in with me. Be my girlfriend, we could be a team, we could build a life together, and we could make each other's lives complete. I can remember shaking uncontrollably as I was asking her how she would feel about moving in, dreading the thought of her saying no. But instead, she looked at me and smiled and said she'd love to move in with me. And as soon as I heard those words, I felt like the happiest and luckiest man in the world. As soon as she moved in, life became better than I ever thought possible. I really did feel like we were a team, developing something good. I agreed to give her an allowance so that she didn't need to work, and I agreed to 15,000 baht a month. I was also responsible for paying the bills, paying for the food, any trips we went on. I was paying for everything, but that only seemed right because I had money and she didn't. I truly believed, thinking at it from the perspective of myself at the time, that if she had money like I did, she would have given me money as an allowance. That's how in love I was with her. The days turned into weeks, turned into months, and after 2 or 3 months, I felt like I'd known her my whole life. She started talking about her village, where she was from, a tiny village up in northeastern Thailand in a part of the country known as Isan. She kept saying how it was her dream to live there when she was older, but it was always about the money, she said. She didn't have enough. She showed me some pictures of what it looked like when she was a little girl, and it was a stark contrast to how she looked today. A small wooden house on stilts, her parents sat behind her on a mat, and it just looked like any other family, although it was in a place so different from where I was from. I liked the way she described it. I liked what she was talking about, and I thought maybe we needed to go for a visit. It was nice to picture it because I'd never been. I didn't know what it was like, and that's when your imagination can run wild with pictures of what this place is actually about. The idea to go and visit was only that, a visit, maybe for a week, but things could change. She never talked about wanting to live there right now, just how nice it was, and how eventually she would like to live there. I was thinking she meant in many years' time, but when I said I'd love to go and visit, she said okay, but if we go, I can only take you if I tell my parents that we'll get married. If you agree to that, then we can go. So without hesitation, I said okay, I will marry you. As soon as I agreed to get married, she was happy, and the feeling of being engaged was weird because it felt so natural and normal, yet also it felt like it was a dream, like I was in a trance-like state, because how could I be engaged to such an incredibly beautiful girl? It was only a week after we discussed it that we were on the bus north. The bus wasn't bad actually, really big seats and comfortable and very cheap, and we went through the night. She slept with her head against my shoulder, and the bus stopped at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, and everyone got out and started eating. I thought that was strange because why is everyone eating at 3 a.m? Going to that part of Thailand felt like I was an insider. It felt like I was going places that many guys don't go, and because of that, I knew Thailand more than them. I had a bigger connection to Thailand, and when I looked at her sat next to me, next to the window, and she was asleep, thinking only a few months ago she was a diamond in a bar, but now she was my fiancé. I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. We arrived at 6 a.m. into the town, and from there we had to find transport to the village about 20 minutes away. It was very different to Bangkok, very different to Pattaya as well, and when you looked around and thought this is where she came from, you start to picture how different Bangkok was for her as well. The bar experience for her would have been a shock, because where she was from, there was so much quiet and peace and no foreigners in sight. We got to the village half an hour later after paying a pickup to let us sit in the back, and I was introduced to her family and they all smiled, and she immediately said we were engaged to marry, and the first thing was a conversation with the parents. That was weird in itself because I was probably 15 years older than both her parents, but it didn't feel weird, it felt natural because we were in Thailand. The first thing that we needed to get out of the way was talk of Sinsot. I wasn't prepared, she never told me about it, and I was taken aback. But when I was convinced that this is the way things were done, I agreed, and I was assured to go and get money straight away, so that the relationship could flourish. I did, and I was happy that I did. With the pleasantries out of the way, she showed me around. Her family lived in a wooden house on stilts, an open floor area with a hammock underneath, and that's where they parked the family motorbike. Her parents were friendly enough, but I bet it was weird for them if I look back. This old guy who couldn't walk properly with their daughter, but I thought they looked up to me, I really did. I shared a bottle of whiskey with her brother, and I had to sit on the floor to eat and drink, which was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do, but I lived with it. Immense pain for days after that, but it was worth it, because I was one of them. I was in it with them. But most importantly, I had this amazing girlfriend. That was now my fiancée. We started talking about getting married, what the process would look like, how much everything would cost, and I wanted to make sure that everybody was happy and content. My biggest fear at the time was losing her. I also didn't want to look weak, like I didn't have any money, and I could hear my own voice saying yes to things that perhaps I should have said no to. I felt like I needed to, otherwise I wouldn't appear like they respected me the way I expected. They all smiled though when I agreed to their terms, and she squeezed my hand saying thank you, and I took that as a sign of love and affection. Everything was arranged and we could return in a few weeks. A special day was coming up and that's when the wedding should be. So I gave them the money to pay for it and we left back to Bangkok, back to our lives, and had a great month before returning. We did the whole ceremony and after that we were married. It felt surreal but amazing at the same time. And there I was, standing in the middle of rural Thailand with this amazing girl by my side who was now my wife. It was special and it felt great. It was amazing to be married back in Bangkok. She was living in my place and I couldn't believe how lucky I felt. We got married at the district office not long after and I decided to switch to a marriage extension as opposed to a retirement one. I don't know what it was, it just made me feel a little bit more connected to her and the country, and I felt really proud being able to call her my wife. It was great going into shops and buying things for her, seeing how happy she was. It was amazing to be so in love. I set a monthly budget in my head that I wanted to spend, that was for rent, food, fun, and any other eventualities, and I told her I wanted to keep it as tight as possible so we could think about the future and make sure everything was good. She always agreed with me, as if she looked up to me, like what I said makes sense, and she did what I said, everything would be good. That is how I felt she looked at me at the time. I never had any ideas that she would have her own ideas about what she would think was good, because I had more money than her, therefore surely I knew best. It was fun doing little things together. We used to get those cheap DVDs back then and we'd watch them together. We'd go out for meals, go to drink together, but we'd go to different places, and never back to the bar where we met. I felt proud that I was able to help her out of that world. I thought she looked up to me because of it, and at the time I would have bet my life on that thought. It was so fun for the first few months we were together. It was amazing, and I felt like life couldn't get any better than this. She was my dream, and I was her dream, and when I thought back to my old life from time to time, I would shudder because those thoughts made me feel scared. I was always aware that life was only a mistake away and things could go wrong, but up until this point I'd made no mistakes. I was solidifying my ability to stay in Thailand, and that was all that mattered, and I was happy with how things were going. It didn't take long before she brought up the idea of going up to live in the village. She brought up the idea of building our own place. She already had land in the family that we could use, she said, and she said it could be a place we'd spend some of our time in. She didn't work it like we'd live there all the time. It was like our country getaway, where we'd spend a few weeks every month, something like that. That's how she framed it. And as soon as she said it, I was drawn to the idea because it was her idea, and making her ideas come true would only make her love me more. I was happy in Bangkok, but truth be told, I was happy anywhere I went with her. And she talked about how one of her friends' husbands had built a place in a different part of Isan, and their lives were so much better when they moved there. And she felt like we could do the same. I was concerned when it came to the costs, saying perhaps we should wait a little bit, but she was persistent and talked about how we could have somewhere that wouldn't cost much. I wasn't about to do anything stupid, so I decided to think about it properly over the course of a whole month, and I told her that's what I was doing. I spoke to a few friends, and some of them just said, go for it, but be careful. And some of them said, don't do it at all, you'll lose all your money. The guys who said don't do it were the guys who had been burned themselves. The guys who said go for it but be careful were guys who seemed to be in successful relationships. So that should tell you all you need to know. Whoever you are seeking advice for will advise you based on their own biases. So I thought that if that's what she wanted to do, that's what I wanted to do as well. And I said, let's just do it. Get a small place to start with, and if anything, we can add to it later. I tried to calculate how much it would cost, but I looked at how much money I still had, and I wasn't scared. I was happy to think I was building this life with her, and this would be an even bigger connection that I would have with her. When I agreed, we went up to the village. I handed over money to buy the land, even though before she said it was family land and we could build on it. I wasn't aware I'd have to pay for it, but I gave 200,000 baht to her father for the land. I was told it was transferred to her, and I was happy because I thought what was hers was mine. It was big enough that we could have a bit of a garden, but also far enough away so we could have our own space. And I can remember having this land and thinking we were going to go back to Bangkok for a few months, only to be told that we could start construction straight away. Things were moving very quickly, and I just went along with it. I can remember standing there watching them pour the first concrete, watching them put the posts in and marking each wall with the string before they put more blocks on. And I did feel proud. I'm not going to lie, I did, but I also felt scared at the same time. We didn't go back to Bangkok during the whole construction. I left thinking I'd be there for a week, but 4.5 months later, I'm still there and the house was ready, and I had spent a big chunk of money before I could even realise what was going on. We lived in a hotel not far away for 500 baht a night, so it wasn't too bad, and she was always happy to think that we'd have our own place soon. I agreed to let her pick out the colours of the walls, the tiles for the floors, and what she wanted the bathroom and kitchen to be like. The only thing I wanted to control was making sure we had a good quality mattress and bedding. If you've been anywhere in rural Thailand, you might see that they use very bad materials in the bedding, and it makes you itch and get sticky. But aside from that, I was fine with her choosing everything, and she chose everything well, but she always tended to go for the most expensive things. I don't know if she did it on purpose or she just liked them the most, but that is what she did, and because I'd already spent a lot, I thought, what's an extra couple of thousand baht going to cost me? I can remember when the house was ready. I was due a visa extension, so we only spent 2 nights there before returning to Bangkok, but it was amazing to have our own place. I couldn't believe it when I stood back and looked at it. It was like we'd achieved something together and we were unstoppable. Back in Bangkok, it felt strange to be there after all those months. Back to our small room, back to life there. And I got my visa extended, waited 30 days for the result. And after that, we were sat one evening watching a film in the condo when she turned to me and said, "Why don't we just go and live there permanently?" The thing was, I was thinking the same thing. We had that nice house there waiting for us. Why were we in Bangkok with the idea to spend a bit of time in the village? We could spend all the time there. So I thought that we could be both on the same page. I don't know if she wanted me to feel like that. I don't know what it was, but it did seem to be the most sensible thing to do. Why pay rent in Bangkok when we've got a great house to live in? We had all our own stuff there. We could make changes as and when we wanted, and I could take up new hobbies. I could grow things in the garden. I could go for walks around the village. I could get a bicycle and enjoy that. And it did seem to make sense if we lived there permanently. I don't know whether I was just drawn to the idea, even though logically I shouldn't have been, but the more we talked about it while we were watching that film, we didn't even get to the end, and we were both excited to think about living there as opposed to spending a bit of time there instead. It was a huge change to make, a huge life decision, but part of me was thinking that I was doing the right thing. I needed to spend less, so that helped by going there. I was good with the idea, based on the fact it should help me save money. Perhaps that's why I was convincing myself to do it. 3 days after thinking that's what we were going to do, I was packing up things in the condo that I'd accumulated since I'd arrived, thinking about how we were going to send our stuff up to the house. I assumed she'd arranged something, but she was out seeing a few friends and she came back and said, "I think we need to go and buy a car." I looked at her like that wasn't something we talked about, but she said, "Well, that's how we can take our things there. You can remember the village, can't you? And if you want to get about, you need a car. I mean, the way she said it did make sense to me, because I remembered being there and we were totally reliant on everyone else taking us somewhere. If we lived there, we would need our own car. So I'm doing the mental arithmetic for that as another expense, and I'd already brought myself quite close to the wire with the house, but it did feel manageable. I'd gone so far and thought of making her upset and unhappy was scary, so I agreed. I stopped what I was doing and said, let's go and look at cars. But I said it in a way like I was confident, like this is something that I could handle easily, and it wasn't just something I wanted to do to make her happy. I wanted to be the big man, I'll admit it. When I said go and look at cars, I thought we'd go and look at a second-hand lot somewhere. But after we got out of the taxi, outside a Toyota dealership, and she walked inside and I followed her, after no time at all, I'd already agreed to buy a brand new pickup, and that was 800,000 baht. But it did seem like the next step that we needed to take to make our life in the village good. I am embarrassed to say that it did go in her name. It could have gone in mine, I know it could have done, but it went in hers. I just thought about how happy she would be, which would make me happy. With the car parked outside the condo a few days later, we loaded up and headed north. She drove, although she didn't have a license. I didn't have a Thai license and I was okay with her to drive, but it was a scary experience. Arriving there for our new life, I was happy. I was really happy. But I think I was just happy because I thought she loved me. I mean, I loved her so much and we settled into life at the house quite quickly. The first 3 months went by great. I was spending hardly any money. I worked out I would have more than enough money to see me out, but I was only spending very minimally. I'd probably got down to under 20,000 baht a month, which was living very, very close to the wire, but I was happy with her and that's all that I needed. I was happy with waking up, not doing anything and just spending time with her. That's what made me happy. But after 3 months it was clear that she wanted a lot more than just doing nothing, and it was up to me, it seemed, to make her dreams come true. Very small arguments started about this time when she kept asking me to help her open a business that she wanted to try. It wasn't like she was determined to do one business and focus on it. She wanted to try little things. Perhaps she was in the mood for one thing, so she'd do that for a bit. And then she was in the mood for something different and she'd try that. She was always moving from one project to the other, and the way she explained it to me was that she wanted to keep her mind occupied with lots of different things. I felt like I wasn't anyone to stop her because I never knew what I was doing in business and I was just giving her money to try things. And sometimes she would make money, it would be great, and sometimes she wouldn't. But when she did make money, occasionally she'd take me out for a meal and pay for it with the money she earned. But then she'd stop and try something else that wouldn't work. And that was difficult though, and I went with it. Some months she'd go through 100,000 baht and say, look, I made 20,000, look how good I am, not understanding that she didn't really make it because she lost my money. And that's when we started to argue a bit more, even than the first time, and I hated to argue with her because I wanted a peaceful retirement with her by my side. I noticed that my inheritance was going down faster and faster all the time, so much faster than I imagined. It was like being attacked by 1,000 cuts, one after the other, but there were so many one cuts that I wasn't noticing the bigger picture, and the only thing that mattered to me was making her happy, because in turn I could be happy. I tried to stop myself from looking at what was going on because it made me feel sick to think about. But I wasn't telling her how I felt, I was just going along with things, hoping she would get bored and just settle down. I was banking my life on the hope that she would settle down and not want to do anything, because I dreaded the thought of telling her no. I didn't want to tell her no, because I didn't know what her reaction would be. What happens if she fell out with me? What happens if she wasn't affectionate with me? That would have made the whole thing for nothing. So I just kept going, hoping that she would be the one that stopped. We argued more though, and I was usually the one that brought those arguments on, saying I think you need to cut back. But I said it in a way like it was her decision. I wasn't forcing her to do that, I was just asking her, I think it would be better for us if you did that. But she didn't. So I still went along with it, and money was just going down so fast. I got to the point not long after where I understood that if things kept going like this for another year, maybe 2, there would be nothing left, and I would be left in ruins. That was the first time I spelled it out clearly to her. We need to be more careful from now. I've got enough money, but we need to be careful. We can spend 18,000 baht a month and that's it. And that's what I told her. There's no negotiation here. You can do your businesses, you can do little things, But I've given you so much money to try things, nothing else is going to come from me, and you have to be good with that." As soon as I said that, the air changed. When she knew I was deadly serious, it did change. It changed in the way that I was scared about the most. She wasn't as affectionate anymore, and that was why I did everything in the first place, her affection and love. We were still living together, we were still husband and wife, and we still did things together, such as going out to eat occasionally, and we might drive into town occasionally together. But aside from that, I felt like the relationship went cold as soon as I had to put the clamp on spending. She didn't ask for a long time. Probably 3 months she didn't ask for anything. But those were the worst 3 months I'd ever had because it wasn't fun anymore. I didn't expect that change to happen. Deep down I knew it would, but I pushed any thought like that away because I didn't want to hear it, and I didn't think that change would be as bad as it actually was. Everything I did up until that point was for her to be happy, so in turn she would make me happy. That's everything I did. But when I couldn't make her happy the way she had grown accustomed to, largely thanks to me, that was when everything felt real and scary for the first time. She came to me after these 3 months saying she wants to try something else. The first time she smiled as much as she had in ages, and I could see how much it meant to her. And I caved in, because I wanted the love and affection that would come from it. 150,000 baht, a few days of happiness, but then she was cold again, because nothing else was coming, and I just gave in completely because I needed the feeling that she gave me when she was happy. That's how I lost all my money in Thailand, because I needed the feeling of love that I got from her when she was happy. That's the only reason. If she had behaved the way I wanted her to behave, I could have made the money stretch, because I was good at not doing anything. I didn't need to go to extravagant places. I didn't need extravagant things. I was happy with the basics in life. But I wanted the basics in life with her the way I needed her. But I could only have her the way I needed her when she was happy. And to make her happy cost me everything I had. That part of my life still haunts me, because I never fully recovered from it. I had to leave Thailand altogether, taking with me nothing more than I arrived with, yet no money to my name. I got back to work, 60 years old. I didn't have a choice. It was one of those things, take it or leave it, and I regretted everything about Thailand. I just loved her so much, and I wanted her love for me to be the same as my love for her. I wanted her happiness to come from making me happy, but it didn't. My happiness came when she made me happy. This is what made me happy, but to her what made her happy was when she got things that she wouldn't have had really, because if she didn't, she wouldn't have been better off. When everything came down for me in Thailand, the last I heard from her, she went to Pattaya to work there instead of Bangkok. She said more people go there and she can make more money. Unbelievable, really, when she didn't really need to do anything, because we could have had a life together if she'd have done it my way on my terms. But it had to be on her terms, and I had to make it on her terms so that I could live my way. It didn't work, and regardless of all the warnings that I got before, I ignored them, because in the moment, nothing mattered more than her. Even my own life and existence, and that should send alarm bells to anyone thinking about doing the same thing in Thailand.